Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive, thrilling stories every week, join our membership. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee. Enjoy. Forget the zombies for a minute. You know what they'll do. Inside these walls, staying alive is different. They said we were lucky to find this place, but luck here feels off. You start to see small things, the ways everyone acts without talking, the spots no one goes near, the quiet jobs everyone does together, like they're trying to keep something bad away without saying it. No one tells you what to do. You just watch, and you learn. Because you see very fast that if you want to stay alive in this a safe place, you have to start doing these strange, creepy things too. My name's Danny Kowalski, and 3 weeks ago I was fixing transmissions at Paulson's Auto in Millfield, Ohio. Small town, population 3,200, where the biggest excitement was usually high school football and the occasional meth bust. Then the news started coming in from Columbus, then Cleveland, then Cincinnati. Videos on social media that people called fake until the networks picked them up. Dead people walking, biting, spreading whatever made them that way. I remember the exact moment I knew it was real. Mrs. Henderson from down on Elm Street came stumbling into the shop, her church dress torn and bloody, asking for help in a voice that sounded like gravel in a blender. When she lunged at me, I hit her with a wrench. She kept coming until I hit her again, harder. The sound her skull made still echoes in my dreams. That was Tuesday morning. By Wednesday night, Millfield was burning. The roads out were clogged with abandoned cars and bodies. The Ohio National Guard had set up checkpoints on Route 33, but when I got there, I found empty barricades and shell casings scattered in the grass. No soldiers, just blood and tire tracks heading north. I'd been driving my beat-up Chevy for 2 days, surviving on gas station snacks and whatever water I could find, when I spotted the farmhouse. Set back from County Road 550, surrounded by cornfields that stretched to the horizon. White-pink peeling, wraparound porch, sagging on one side, but the windows were boarded up clean and professional. Fresh lumber. Someone was alive in there. The sign by the mailbox read, Morrison Farm, established 1887. But someone had painted over it in careful black letters, Safe Haven, Survivors Welcome, Follow all instructions. I should have driven past. Should have kept going until I found the military or the CDC or whoever was supposed to handle this mess. Instead, I pulled into that gravel driveway and knocked on the front door. A woman answered. Late 40s, graying brown hair pulled back tight, wearing a blue flannel shirt and jeans that looked like they'd been ironed. Her name was Janet Morrison, and she welcomed me with a smile that seemed genuine enough. "You look tired, honey," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Come on in. We'll get you fed and rested. Just one thing, though. We have some house rules here. Nothing too complicated. You'll pick them up quick enough." That was my first mistake, thinking they were just house rules. The farmhouse interior looked normal enough at first glance. Hardwood floors worn smooth by generations of Morrisons, family photos lining the hallway, a grandfather clock ticking steadily in the corner. The smell of beef stew drifted from the kitchen, making my stomach growl. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 3 days. "Danny, right?" Janet said, closing the door behind me. 3 deadbolts clicked into place. "Let me introduce you to everyone." She led me through the living room, where 5 people sat arranged around a coffee table covered in playing cards. They looked up when we entered, but something felt wrong about their expressions. Too eager, like actors waiting for their cue. "Folks, this is Danny," Janet announced. "Danny, meet the family." The family. Not survivors, not refugees. Family. A heavy-set man in his 60s stood first, extending the calloused hand. Tom Bradley, retired from the grain elevator in town. His grip was firm, but his eyes kept darting to the boarded windows. Next was a young woman, maybe 25, with short blonde hair and paint-stained fingers. Amy Chen. She nodded but didn't offer her hand. I was teaching art at the elementary school before. She trailed off. An elderly woman with silver hair and thick glasses peered at me from her recliner. Dolores Novak. Been living here since Janet's daddy took me in after my Harold passed. Her voice carried the hint of an Eastern European accent. The last two were a couple about my age. The man had the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors, while the woman wore scrubs with cartoon animals on them. Rick and Jessica Hoffman, the man said. I was farming the section north of here. Jess worked at the clinic in Millfield. Jessica smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You might remember me. I stitched up your hand that time you caught it on barbed wire. I did remember. 2 years ago, helping my neighbor fix his fence. But Jessica's smile then had been genuine, warm. This version felt rehearsed. Come on, Janet said, guiding me toward the kitchen. Let's get you some food. The kitchen was spacious, with a large wooden table surrounded by mismatched chairs. Cast iron pots bubbled on an old gas stove. Janet ladled stew into a bowl and set it before me with a glass of milk that tasted fresh. Cows still producing, she explained, noticing my surprised expression. We take good care of what we have here. I ate hungrily while Janet bustled around, cleaning dishes that already looked clean, wiping counters that showed no dirt. The stew was excellent, but I noticed she kept glancing at the window above the sink, the one that faced the barn. Mrs. Morrison, I began. Janet, please. Janet, I appreciate the hospitality, but I should probably keep moving tomorrow. Maybe head for the state capitol, see if there's a refugee center or something. Her hands stopped moving. For a moment, the only sound was the grandfather clock in the next room. Oh, honey, she said softly. I don't think that's such a good idea. It's dangerous out there. Much safer to stay put until things settle down. But surely the government... The government? She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Danny, there is no government anymore. No military. No rescue coming. There's just us. Just family. That word again. Family. I finished eating, and Janet showed me upstairs to a small bedroom with faded floral wallpaper and a quilt that smelled like lavender. A single window looked out over the cornfield, now silver in the moonlight. Bathroom's down the hall, she said. But honey, don't use it after 10 p.m. Old pipes, you know. The noise carries... I nodded, though I'd grown up in old houses and knew pipe noise when I heard it. This felt different. Oh, and if you hear anything outside during the night, don't look out the windows. Sometimes the wind plays tricks, makes you think you see things that aren't there. She left me alone then, and I sat on the edge of the bed, processing the day. Outside, I could hear the others moving around downstairs, their voices low and careful. Every few minutes, footsteps would pass by my door, always the same pattern. 3 steps, pause, 2 more steps, pause, like a ritual. Around 9:30, the house grew quiet. I waited until 10:15, then crept to the bathroom. My bladder couldn't wait for morning. The hallway was dark, but I could see light seeping from under doors. People were awake but silent. As I passed Dolores's room, I heard a soft scratching sound, like fingernails on wood. Steady, rhythmic. Scratch, 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 pause. Scratch, 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 pause. In the bathroom, I noticed something odd. The mirror had been covered with a towel, not removed, covered, and beneath the sink, someone had placed a small wooden bowl filled with salt. I finished quickly and headed back to my room. But as I passed the window at the end of the hall, movement outside caught my eye. Janet's warning echoed in my mind, but curiosity won. I peered through a gap in the boards. 3 figures stood motionless in the cornfield, about 50 yards from the house. In the pale moonlight, I could see they weren't quite right. The way they stood, perfectly still. The angle of their heads. They were facing the house, watching, and they looked like people I recognized from town. I woke to the sound of someone moving around downstairs. The bedside clock read 5:47 a.m. Gray dawn light filtered through the boards covering my window, casting thin lines across the worn carpet. The scratching sound from Dolores's room had continued most of the night. I'd finally fallen asleep around 3, exhausted despite my unease. Downstairs, I found Janet already dressed and preparing breakfast. Eggs, bacon, fresh biscuits. The normalcy felt surreal after weeks of scavenged food and constant fear. "Morning, Danny," she said without turning around. "Coffee's ready. Hope you slept well." "Thank you. Yes, mostly." I poured coffee from an old percolator, noting how she kept her back to me while cooking. Though I heard some noise during the night. Scratching sounds. Her shoulders tensed slightly. Old house. Mice, probably. We'll set some traps today. But I'd grown up around mice. This hadn't sounded like rodents. The others began filtering into the kitchen around 6. Tom arrived first, wearing the same clothes as yesterday. Then Rick and Jessica together, holding hands but walking stiffly, like people performing affection rather than feeling it. Amy came last, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd slept as poorly as I had. "Morning routine," Janet announced, setting plates around the table. "Danny, you'll want to learn this. We eat together at 6, noon, and 7. No exceptions." "What if someone's not hungry?" I asked. The question hung in the air like a bad smell. Everyone stopped moving. "We eat together," Dolores said firmly from her spot at the table. "Family eats together." After breakfast, Janet handed me a folded piece of paper. "These'll help you settle in," she said. "Just some guidelines to keep everyone safe and comfortable." I unfolded it, expecting house rules about chores or noise levels. Instead, I found something else entirely. Household guidelines, Morrison Farm. Meals are served at 6 a.m., 12 p.m., and 7 p.m. All residents must attend. No one leaves the house alone. Groups of 3 minimum for any outside activity. Bathroom facilities off limits from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Use the chamber pot in the hall closet if necessary. Do not look directly at any figures you might see in the cornfield. Avert your eyes and continue with your task. The barn is strictly off limits to new residents. Established family members only. All exterior doors must remain locked at all times. Janet holds the only keys. If you hear your name called from outside after dark, do not respond. It is not who you think it is. The salt circles around each bed must be maintained daily. Sweep and re-pour fresh salt each morning. During the 3 a.m. check, remain in your room regardless of what you hear. Trust only what you see during daylight hours. Nighttime brings deceptions. "Salt circles?" I asked, looking up from the paper. "For protection," Amy said quietly. "You'll understand soon enough." "Protection from what?" "The infected." Tom laughed bitterly. "Son, the infected are the least of our problems out here." Before I could ask what he meant, Janet clapped her hands together. "Enough talk. We have work to do. Danny, you'll help Rick check the fence line today. Amy and Jessica will tend the garden. Tom and Dolores will handle indoor maintenance. The fence line stretched around the entire property, roughly 10 acres of farmland and buildings. Rick led me along the perimeter, carrying the toolbox and a rifle slung across his back. Every 20 feet, we stopped to examine the posts and wire. "What exactly are we looking for?" I asked. "Brakes, mostly. Anything that might let them through." He knelt beside a post, testing its stability. "But also signs." "Signs of what?" Rick glanced around nervously before answering. "Them trying to get in. They're smart, Danny. Smarter than anyone wants to admit." We found the first sign about an hour into our patrol. A section of fence near the cornfield had been tested. The wire bent outward in several places, as if something had pushed against it repeatedly. The ground on the far side showed scuff marks and what looked like dried blood. "How long have they been doing this?" I asked. "Since the second week," Rick said, pulling wire cutters from his toolbox. "At first, we thought it was random. Infected wandering around, bumping into things. But it's not random, Danny. They're learning." He began repairing the fence while I kept watch. The cornfield stretched endlessly in both directions, stalks now brown and dying in the October cold. Perfect cover for anything that might want to approach the house. "Rick, those people I saw last night in the field..." "Don't." His voice was sharp. "Don't talk about what you see at night. That's rule number 10 for a reason." We worked in silence after that, moving methodically around the property. Near the barn, I noticed something odd. The building sat about 30 yards from the house, but the fence line curved around it in a wide arc, leaving the barn outside the protected perimeter. "Why isn't the barn included?" I asked. Rick's hand stilled on the wire he was repairing. "Because we don't want to keep things out of the barn," he said quietly. "We want to keep things in." Before I could process that statement fully, a scream echoed across the fields. Human, female, coming from the direction of the house. Rick dropped his tools and started running. I followed, my heart hammering against my ribs. We reached the back porch to find Amy standing in the garden, both hands pressed to her mouth, staring at something in the dirt. "What happened?" Janet demanded, bursting through the screen door. Amy pointed with a shaking finger. There, among the withered tomato plants, was a human head. Male, middle-aged, with graying hair and familiar features. I recognized him, Bill Hensley, who'd owned the hardware store in town. But Bill's eyes were open, tracking our movements. His mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish drowning in air. "Rule 4, Janet said calmly, grabbing Amy's shoulders and turning her away. "Don't look directly. Danny, same goes for you." "But he's not," Jessica said firmly. "Not anymore. Haven't been for days." Tom appeared with a shovel and a burlap sack. He approached the head without looking at it directly, scooped it up efficiently, and carried it toward the barn. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded. Janet studied my face for a long moment. "You really want to know?" "Because once I tell you, you can't unknow it, and you can't leave." I thought about my options. The roads were clogged with abandoned vehicles and roaming infected. Winter was coming, and I had nowhere else to go. "Tell me." She nodded slowly. "The infected aren't just mindless anymore, Danny. They're evolving, learning, and the ones around here, they're trying to become us. They study our faces, our voices, our mannerisms. Then they try to replace us." "That's crazy." "Is it? You saw the head. Bill Hensley died 3 weeks ago. We watched him turn, Watch Tom put him down with a shotgun blast to the skull. But pieces of him keep showing up, trying to convince us he's still alive. Amy had stopped shaking and was now staring at the spot where the head had been. "They get better at it each time," she whispered. "More convincing. Yesterday I could have sworn I heard my sister calling for help from the cornfield. She died in Columbus 2 months ago." The full weight of our situation began to settle over me. We weren't just hiding from zombies. We were hiding from something far worse. Creatures that could think, plan, and mimic the people we'd lost. "The rules," I said, understanding finally dawning. "The rules keep us alive," Janet confirmed. "Follow them exactly, and you might survive another day. Break them." She gestured toward the barn. "Well, let's just say we've learned not to break them." As if summoned by her words, a voice drifted across the field. Clear, familiar, heartbreaking. "Danny? Danny Kowalski? Is that you, son?" My father's voice. Dad, who died of a heart attack 2 years before any of this started. I took a step toward the sound before Rick's hand clamped down on my arm. "Rule 7, he said quietly. "It's not who you think it is." That evening during dinner, Janet explained the 3 a.m. check. "Every night one of us makes rounds," she said, cutting her pot roast into precise squares. "We check the doors, the salt circles, make sure everything's secure. Tonight's my turn, but I want you to stay awake and listen, Danny. Learn the routine." "What am I listening for?" "Everything," Tom said around a mouthful of mashed potatoes. "Every sound, every voice, every scratch at the windows. But remember Rule 9, stay in your room no matter what you hear." After dinner, I helped Jessica with dishes while the others settled into their evening routines. Amy worked on a charcoal sketch of the cornfield, though she kept the view deliberately vague, avoiding any details that might show the figures we all pretended not to see. Rick and Tom played chess with wooden pieces, worn smooth by years of handling. Dolores sat in her recliner, knitting something that looked like a child's sweater. "Whose sweater is that?" I asked Jessica quietly. She glanced over at the elderly woman, her expression sad. "Her grandson's. He died in the first week, but she keeps making them anyway. Says he gets cold at night." "Where is he buried?" Jessica's hands stilled in the soapy water. "He's not buried, Danny. He's in the barn." Before I could ask what she meant, Janet announced bedtime. We all trooped upstairs like obedient children, each disappearing into our assigned rooms. I lay on my bed fully clothed, listening to the house settle around me. At 11:30, I heard the first voice. "Danny, son, are you in there?" My father again, just outside my window. The voice was perfect. The slight rasp from years of smoking, the way he always made my name sound like a question when he was worried. I squeezed my eyes shut and recited the rules in my head. Rule 7. If you hear your name called from outside after dark, do not respond. It is not who you think it is. But God, it sounded like him. "I know you can hear me, Danny. I'm hurt, son. I need help getting inside." My father had never called me son that much. The thing outside was overselling it, trying too hard to sound paternal. That realization helped me stay put, but my hands still shook as I pulled the pillow over my head. The voice persisted for 20 minutes before moving on. I heard it try Rick and Jessica's room next, then Amy's. Each time it adjusted slightly, becoming more pleading, more desperate. But no one responded. At 1:15 a.m., a child started crying. The sound came from multiple directions: the cornfield, the barn, somewhere near the front porch. 3 children, all crying in perfect harmony. The sobs were heartbreaking, the kind that made you want to rush outside and scoop them up, comfort them. "Grandma Dolores?" one of them called. "Grandma, I'm scared. The monsters are chasing me." Through the thin walls, I heard Dolores begin to weep. Soft, muffled sobs that she tried to muffle with her blanket. But she stayed in her room. The children cried until 2:45 a.m., then stopped abruptly. 5 minutes before 3, I heard Janet's door open. Her footsteps moved carefully down the hallway, pausing outside each room. At my door, she stopped and whispered, "Stay quiet, Danny. Whatever you hear next, don't react." She continued downstairs, and I listened to her move through the house, the soft click of locks being checked, the whisper of curtains being adjusted, the quiet scrape of something being poured. Fresh salt for the circles, I assumed. Then the real show began. Every person I'd ever lost started calling to me. My father again, but joined by my grandfather, who died when I was 12. My high school friend Marcus, killed in a car accident 5 years ago. Even Mrs. Henderson, the woman whose skull I'd crushed with a wrench in those first terrifying days. "Danny, why did you hurt me?" she asked, her voice thick with accusation. "I was just confused. I needed help, and you killed me." That one nearly broke me. Because it was true, I had killed her, and the guilt had been eating at me ever since. The thing outside had found my weakness, and was playing it like a violin. But worse than the familiar voices were the new ones. People I'd never met, claiming to be survivors from other towns, begging to be let inside. A woman said she was from Zanesville, traveling with her 2 children. A man claimed to be a National Guard sergeant with supplies and medical equipment. "Please," the woman sobbed. "My babies are sick. They need shelter. I can see the lights in your windows. I know someone's alive in there." The performance was flawless. If I hadn't known better, I would have rushed downstairs to let them in. But I'd learned to distrust my instincts in this place. Around 3:30, I heard Janet returning upstairs. Her footsteps paused outside my door again. "Good job," she whispered. "I know that was hard." The voices outside faded as dawn approached, but I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay there processing what I'd experienced. The things outside weren't just mimicking random people. They were studying us, learning our histories, finding our emotional weak spots. At breakfast, no one mentioned the night's events directly, but I could see the toll in everyone's faces. Amy's hands shook as she buttered her toast. Tom kept glancing toward the windows, as if expecting to see familiar faces peering in. Dolores looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. "How long has this been going on?" I asked Janet quietly. "Since the 3rd week," she replied. "Started with simple things, infected that looked almost like people we knew, but they get better every night, more convincing." "How do they know so much about us?" Rick spoke up from across the table. "We think they retain some memories from when they were human. Not just their own memories, but somehow they can access the memories of other infected they encounter." "Like a hive mind?" "Something like that," Jessica said. "The ones outside last night. Some of them were probably people from Millfield, people who knew you, knew your family. When they turned, that information became available to all of them. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If the infected could share memories, then they knew everything about us. Our relationships, our fears, our regrets. They could become anyone we'd ever cared about." "The barn," I said suddenly. "You said Dolores's grandson was in the barn, along with Bill Hensley's head. What exactly is in there?" The kitchen fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. Things we couldn't bring ourselves to destroy completely, Janet said finally. People we loved who turned. We couldn't let them roam free, but we couldn't finish them either. They are still active. Some of them, the newer ones especially. They seem to retain more of who they were before. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Dolores's grandson Tommy still calls for her sometimes, asks for bedtime stories, wants to know when his mom is coming to pick him up. The old woman began crying softly into her coffee. That's why the barn is outside the fence, Tom explained. If they ever got loose, we want them to go away from the house, not toward it. But why keep them at all? Because, Amy said quietly, they're all we have left of the people we loved. After breakfast, I volunteered to help with outdoor chores, needing to see the barn for myself. Janet assigned me to collect eggs from the chicken coop with Rick, but I could see the large wooden structure from where we worked. It looked normal enough from the outside, red paint faded but solid, double doors secured with multiple chains and padlocks. But as we gathered eggs, I began to notice sounds coming from inside. Soft thumping, occasional moans, and once, clear as day, a child's voice singing the nursery rhyme. How many are in there? I asked Rick. 14 now. Started with just Tommy. Dolores couldn't let Tom put him down when he turned. Then Bill Hensley. Then Amy's boyfriend Jake when he showed up infected 3 weeks later. Each time someone found an excuse to keep them instead of destroying them. That's not sustainable. Rick's laugh was bitter. No kidding. The chains are getting harder to maintain, and they're getting smarter, more coordinated. Yesterday I watched through the gap in the doors. They're working together now, trying to break free. As if summoned by his words, the singing from inside the barn stopped abruptly. A moment later, a voice called out, "Rick? Rick Hoffman? I know you're out there." It was Jake's voice, Amy's dead boyfriend. "She misses you, Rick." "Amy does. She told me how you've been looking at her since Jessica started pulling away. How you want her." Rick's face went white. "That's not true. Isn't it? Amy's young, pretty, alive. Jessica's been different since she watched her patients turn at the clinic. Cold, distant. Amy would be grateful for comfort." I watched Rick struggle with himself, his jaw working as he fought not to respond. But I could see the seed of doubt taking root. Because somewhere in that horrible manipulation was probably a grain of truth. "Rule 7, I reminded him quietly. Rick nodded, but his hands were shaking as we finished collecting eggs. The voices from the barn continued until we were back inside the house, each comment perfectly calibrated to hurt. That afternoon, I found Janet in the kitchen and asked the question that had been building all day. How long before they break free? She looked up from the vegetables she was chopping, her face grave. "Soon," she said. "Maybe tonight. Maybe tomorrow. The chains won't hold much longer." Then what? Then we follow the final rule, the one that's not written down, which is Janet's knife stilled against the cutting board. When the barn breaks open, we burn everything and run, even if it means leaving family behind. The barn chains broke at 2:17 a.m. on my 4th night. I know the exact time because I was lying awake, counting the minutes until the 3 a.m. check, when the sound of snapping metal echoed across the property. Sharp, final, like the crack of breaking bones. Then silence. Through my boarded window, I could hear Janet moving downstairs earlier than usual. Her footsteps were hurried, panicked. A few minutes later, Tom's door opened. Then Rick's. Hushed voices drifted up from the kitchen, too low to make out words but high with tension. I waited until I heard Janet's signal, 3 soft knocks on my door, before getting dressed and heading downstairs. The others were gathered around the kitchen table, still in their night clothes. Amy sat with her arms wrapped around herself, rocking slightly. Jessica held Rick's hand, but her knuckles were white with strain. Tom stood by the window, peering through a gap in the boards toward the barn. "They're out," Janet said without preamble. "All 14. "Where are they now?" I asked. "Gone," Tom reported from the window. "Barn's empty. Doors are hanging open like a mouth." Dolores began to sob quietly. "My Tommy. Where's my Tommy?" "Mrs. Novak," Janet said gently, "you know Tommy's not your grandson anymore. But he remembered my birthday last week. Through the barn wall, he sang happy birthday just like he used to." The old woman's faith in a dead child was heartbreaking, but I was more concerned with immediate threats. "If they're free, shouldn't we be preparing to leave? You said when the barn broke open." "We can't leave yet," Rick interrupted. "Not in the dark. They'll be waiting for us on the roads, and we can't see them coming until it's too late." "So we wait until dawn?" "We wait until dawn," Janet confirmed. "But we need to be ready. Pack only essentials. Food, water, weapons. We leave everything else." For the next 2 hours we prepared in tense silence. I had little to pack. Just the clothes on my back and a few items from the kitchen. The others moved through the house like ghosts, touching familiar objects one last time before abandoning them. Amy spent 20 minutes staring at her art supplies before finally selecting a single sketchbook and pencil. Jessica gathered medical supplies from her bag, her hands steady despite everything. Tom cleaned his shotgun with practiced efficiency, while Dolores packed a small suitcase with trembling fingers. As we worked, the voices started. They began softly, almost conversationally, drifting in from the cornfield. Tommy's voice calling for his grandmother. Jake asking Amy to come outside so they could talk. Bill Hensley demanding to know why we'd kept him locked up when he was still human, still thinking, still feeling. "Don't listen," Janet reminded us repeatedly. "Pack and focus on getting ready to leave." But the voices grew louder, more insistent, and worse, more convincing. Around 4:30 a.m., I heard my own voice calling from outside. "Help me," it said. "Please, someone help me. I'm hurt. I can't make it to the door." The mimicry was perfect. Every inflection, every pause exactly right. If I'd heard it from another room, I would have thought someone was playing a recording of me speaking. "They're using our own voices against us," Rick said, his face pale in the lamplight. "They've been listening to us talk for days." The psychological assault continued for another hour. We heard ourselves begging, crying, screaming for help. The infected had learned our speech patterns, our emotional tells, everything that made us sound human. Then, just before dawn, something changed. A new voice joined the chorus. Young, female, terrified. "Is anyone there? Please, I can see lights in the house. My car broke down and there are things chasing me. I'm hurt and I can't run anymore." I'd never heard this voice before. None of us had. Through the kitchen window, Tom reported movement at the edge of the cornfield. "There's someone there. Young woman, blonde hair. She's limping." We all crowded around the window, peering through the gaps in the boards. In the gray, pre-dawn light, I could see her clearly. Early 20s, wearing a torn Ohio State sweatshirt and jeans, blood on her left leg. She looked genuinely terrified, constantly checking over her shoulder as if expecting pursuit. "That's not one of them," Amy whispered. "Look at how she moves. The infected don't show fear like that." The woman spotted our house and began limping toward it faster, calling out desperately, "Please! I know someone's in there. I can see the lights. There are things in the corn behind me. We have to help her," Dolores said, moving toward the door. "No." Janet grabbed the old woman's arm. "It's a trick. It has to be." "But she's not from town," Rick argued. "None of the voices we've heard were strangers. They've all been people we knew." "Maybe they've learned to create new personas," Tom suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. The woman reached our front porch and began pounding on the door. "Please, they're coming. I can hear them in the corn." And she was right. Through the windows, we could see shapes moving between the stalks. Dark figures that moved wrong, jerky and coordinated at the same time. They were closing in on the house. "We have to let her in," Amy said, reaching for the locks. "Amy, no," Janet commanded. "Rule 7. We don't respond to anyone outside after dark." "But it's almost dawn." "Not dawn yet." The woman's pounding grew more frantic. "Please." They're right behind me. I found myself moving toward the door despite Janet's protests. Everything about the woman seemed genuine. Her fear, her injuries, the way she kept looking back at the pursuing shapes. If she was one of them, she was the most convincing actor I'd ever seen. My hand was on the first deadbolt when Tom's shotgun barrel pressed against the back of my neck. "Step away from the door, son." "Tom, she's real. Look at her." "Maybe, maybe not. But we don't break the rules, not ever." Through the door, the woman's voice rose to a scream. "They've got me. Oh God, they've got me." Her cries turned to terrible, wet, choking sounds. Then silence. "Check the window," Janet ordered. Tom moved to the front window while keeping his gun trained on me. After a moment, he reported, "Nothing. Porch is empty. No blood. No body. She's gone." "See?" Janet said. "It was a test. They're getting smarter, more creative." But I wasn't convinced. The woman's terror had seemed real in a way that the mimicked voices never did. What if she'd been genuine? What if we'd just condemned an innocent person to death because of our paranoia? The doubt ate at me as we finished our preparations. By full daylight, we were ready to leave. Our vehicles, Rick's pickup truck and Janet's van, were loaded with supplies and fuel. The plan was to drive north toward Toledo, hoping to find a military checkpoint or refugee center. As we gathered by the front door for one final check, Amy made a discovery that changed everything. "The salt circles," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They're broken." We rushed upstairs to see for ourselves. Every salt circle around every bed had been disturbed, not scattered randomly, but carefully moved, formed into new shapes, letters. In my room, the salt spelled out SOON. In Amy's, "We know you." In Rick and Jessica's, "No escape." The infected had been inside the house. While we'd been focused on the drama outside, they'd somehow gotten in and left us a message. "How?" Tom demanded, checking his shotgun's chamber. All the doors were locked. We were all awake. Janet's face had gone white. "There's only one way. Someone let them in." We stared at each other, the implication hanging in the air like poison gas. One of us had broken the rules. One of us had opened a door, responded to a voice, or somehow compromised our defenses. "Who?" Rick asked quietly. Before anyone could answer, we heard the sound of engines starting outside. Our vehicles. Tom rushed to the window. "They're stealing the trucks." Through the glass, I could see figures in the driver's seats. They looked like us. perfect copies sitting behind the wheels of our escape vehicles, driving them slowly away across the fields. We were trapped. No vehicles, no way to leave, and the infected somewhere inside our supposedly safe house. "New plan," Janet said grimly, pulling a can of gasoline from the utility closet. "We burn it all." Janet's gasoline can was nearly empty. We spread what little fuel remained throughout the downstairs rooms, soaking curtains and furniture while arguing about our next move. The acrid smell burned my nostrils, but it was better than the alternative, staying trapped in a house that had already been compromised. "There's more fuel in the barn," Rick said, hefting Tom's spare rifle. "Generator's got a full tank." "Absolutely not," Janet replied, striking a match and letting it burn down to her fingers before shaking it out. "We're not going near that place." "Then how do we make sure this burns hot enough?" Before Janet could answer, Amy spoke up from her position by the window. "We've got bigger problems. They're coming back." I joined her at the window, peering through the boards. Our stolen vehicle sat abandoned in the cornfield, doors hanging open. But moving between the brown stalks were shapes. Dozens of them, walking in perfect formation toward the house. They looked like townspeople. I recognized Mrs. Chen from the post office, walking arm in arm with Pastor Williams from the Methodist Church. Behind them came the Kowalski twins, who'd graduated 2 years ahead of me, still wearing their letter jackets. All dead. All moving with that horrible, coordinated purpose. "How many?" Tom asked, checking his shotgun. 30, maybe 40, Amy replied. "And they're not random infected. These are people from Millfield. People we knew." "The barn group must have found them," Jessica said. "Called them here somehow." Through the glass, I watched my high school math teacher, Mr. Peterson, adjust his tie with careful precision. He looked exactly as I remembered him. Pressed shirt, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, that patient smile he'd worn when explaining algebra to confused teenagers. Except Mr. Peterson had died of cancer 3 years ago. "They're not just mimicking anymore," I realized aloud. "They're rebuilding our entire community." The infected reached our fence line and stopped. For a moment, they stood perfectly still, studying the house like tourists examining a historical landmark. Then, moving as one, they began to climb. "Light it," Tom ordered. "Light it now." Janet struck another match and dropped it onto the gasoline-soaked sofa. Flames raced across the fabric, catching the curtains and spreading to the wooden walls with hungry speed. Within minutes, the living room was an inferno. But as we grabbed our packs and headed for the back door, we discovered our escape route blocked. Standing on the rear porch were 4 figures I recognized immediately. My parents, my older brother Mike, and my ex-girlfriend Sarah Chen. All of them smiling, all of them beckoning me forward with familiar gestures. "Danny," my mother called, her voice perfect in every detail. "Honey, we've been looking everywhere for you. Come home with us." My father nodded, hands in his pockets the way he always stood when he was trying to look casual. "Your truck's out front, son. Let's get you out of this mess." "Don't listen," Janet warned. But her voice sounded distant compared to the people I'd loved my entire life. Sarah stepped forward, and my heart nearly stopped. She looked exactly as she had the night we'd broken up. Long black hair, that small scar on her chin from falling off her bike as a kid, wearing the blue dress I'd bought her for prom. "I was wrong to leave you, Danny," she said softly. "I've missed you so much. We can start over." The rational part of my brain knew this was manipulation. Sarah had moved to California 2 years ago, and even if she'd come back for the outbreak, she wouldn't be standing here looking 19 again. But emotion doesn't follow logic, and seeing her face made my chest tight with old grief. Sarah's in Los Angeles, I said, mostly to remind myself. She got married last spring. The thing wearing Sarah's face tilted its head with that same curious expression she'd always made when I said something she didn't understand. Married? Danny, what are you talking about? I'm right here. Behind me, smoke was filling the kitchen. The flames had reached the stairs and were climbing toward the second floor. We had maybe 5 minutes before the whole structure collapsed. We need another way out, Rick said, coughing through his shirt. Basement, Dolores suggested. Root cellar has an outside entrance. We raced downstairs as the infected on the back porch began pounding on the door. The basement was dark and musty, filled with canning jars and old farm equipment. Dolores led us to a narrow wooden door I hadn't noticed before. Leads to the storm cellar, she explained, fumbling with a rusty latch. Comes up behind the chicken coop. The door opened onto steep stone steps, descending into earth that smelled of potatoes and damp soil. We filed down single file, Tom bringing up the rear with his shotgun ready. The storm cellar was cramped but functional, with shelves of preserved vegetables and a musty sleeping bag in one corner. At the far end, another set of steps led up to heavy wooden doors that opened to the outside. Tom pushed through first, scanning the area before waving us forward. The chicken coop provided cover as we emerged, but I could see infected moving around the burning house. Our perfect copies stood guard at every exit, waiting patiently for us to appear. The cornfield, Janet whispered. We can use it for cover, work our way to the road. But as we prepared to run, Amy grabbed my own. Danny, look. She pointed toward the main group of infected near the house. They were organizing themselves into search parties, spreading out in coordinated patterns that would cover every possible escape route. This wasn't random behavior. It was tactical planning. They're hurting us, I realized, driving us toward something. Toward what? Before I could answer, a new voice called out from the cornfield. Clear, familiar, heartbreaking. Danny Kowalski. I turned toward the sound and saw him standing 20 feet away between the brown stalks. Mark Chen, Amy's younger brother. He'd been my best friend since elementary school, the kind of kid who'd give you his lunch money if you forgot yours. Mark had died in the first week of the outbreak. I'd seen his obituary in the last newspaper before everything collapsed. Mark? Amy whispered beside me. Hey, Amy, he said, grinning that crooked smile I remembered. Hey, Danny. Mom and Dad sent me to find you guys. They've got a safe place set up in Columbus. Military protection, medical supplies, everything. He looked perfect. Same shaggy brown hair, same Star Wars t-shirt he'd worn constantly senior year, same way of standing with his weight on one foot. If I hadn't seen his death notice, I would have believed completely. Mark died, Amy said, her voice breaking. I saw his body. That wasn't me, he replied reasonably. That was some other kid who looked like me. Happens more than you'd think. I've been hiding out, waiting for the coast to clear. Amy took a step toward him. Amy, no, I warned. But what if it really is him? What if he survived somehow? Mark held out his hand to his sister. Come on, Amy. Let's get out of here. This place is going to burn down soon. As if summoned by his words, a section of the farmhouse roof collapsed with a crash of sparks and burning timber. The infected around the house didn't react to the noise. They just kept searching, methodical and patient. Please, Mark continued. I know you're scared, but I'm really me. Ask me something only I would know. Amy wiped tears from her eyes. What did you call me when we were kids? Peanut. Because you were so small and you loved peanut butter sandwiches. The answer was correct. I remembered him calling her that. But it proved nothing. Any infected who'd encountered Mark's memories would have access to that information. What about the time we built the treehouse? Amy pressed. Summer before 8th grade, in the old oak behind the Hendersons' place. You fell and broke your wrist on the 3rd day, and I convinced Mom it happened riding your bike, so you wouldn't get in trouble for climbing trees. Also correct. Also something that could have been shared through the infected memory network. But Amy was losing the battle with her emotions. Her brother, or the thing wearing his face, looked so real, so alive. The need to believe was overwhelming her logic. "It is you," she whispered, moving closer. "Amy, stop," Rick called out, but she was already reaching for Mark's outstretched hand. The moment their fingers touched, Mark's expression changed. The warmth left his eyes, replaced by something cold and calculating. His grip tightened on Amy's wrist, and she cried out in pain. "Got you," he said, and his voice was no longer quite right. Still Mark's tone, but with something else underneath. Something hungry. Tom's shotgun boomed, and Mark staggered backward, releasing Amy. But instead of falling, he straightened up and smiled. The shotgun blast had torn through his chest, but no blood flowed. The wound was just an opening, dark and empty. "You can't kill what's already dead," he said pleasantly. "But we can kill you." Around us, the cornfield erupted with movement. Dozens of infected emerged from between the stalks, all wearing familiar faces. My elementary school teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez. The mailman who'd delivered to my neighborhood for 15 years. My barber, my dentist, the woman who'd run the coffee shop downtown. All dead, all wearing the faces of my memories. "Run," Janet commanded. We scattered into the corn, each taking a different direction to divide their attention. I could hear the others crashing through the stalks, their breathing harsh with panic. Behind us, the infected followed with that horrible coordinated pursuit. I ran until my lungs burned, zigzagging between rows, trying to lose the things that looked like people I'd once known. But they knew these fields better than I did. Every time I thought I'd lost them, another familiar face would appear ahead of me, smiling and calling my name. Finally, I broke through the edge of the cornfield onto County Road 550. The pavement stretched empty in both directions, no sign of rescue or refuge. Just me, standing alone in the growing darkness, while behind me, the Marsden farmhouse burned like a beacon in the night. And walking out of the corn came everyone had ever lost, their faces warm with welcome, their arms open in invitation, all of them asking me to come home. My father stepped forward first, his work boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. He looked exactly as he had the day he'd taught me to change oil in our garage. Flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows, grease stains on his jeans, that patient expression he wore when explaining something important. "Danny, you're shaking," he said gently. "Come here, son. Let me help you." I was shaking. The October night had turned cold, and I'd been running through corn stubble for 20 minutes. But it wasn't the temperature making my hands tremble. "You're not real," I said, backing toward the center of the road. "What do you mean, not real?" My mother emerged from the corn behind him, wearing her favorite cardigan and that worried frown she'd perfected during my teenage years. "Danny, you're scaring me. What's wrong?" Behind her came my brother Mike, still wearing his army uniform from his last leave before deployment. He'd died in Afghanistan 3 years ago, but here he stood, looking concerned and alive. "This is Ron," I whispered. "All of you are dead." "Dead?" Mike laughed, the same easy chuckle I remembered from childhood. "Danny, what are you talking about? I just got back from overseas. Mom called, said you were in some kind of trouble." They formed a semicircle around me, their faces showing nothing but love and concern. 3 feet away, 2 feet, close enough to touch. "I know what you are," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. "We're your family," my mother said softly. "We love you. We want to help you." "No, you're those things, the infected. You're using their faces." My father tilted his head, genuinely puzzled. "Infected? Danny, are you feeling all right? You're not making sense." Behind them, more figures emerged from the cornfield. Sarah, looking hurt and confused. Mr. Peterson, adjusting his glasses with that patient teacher expression. Mrs. Henderson, no longer wearing a bloody church dress but a clean apron, as if she'd just finished baking cookies. "We're worried about you, Danny," Sarah said, reaching out her hand. "You've been through something terrible. Let us take care of you." The rational part of my mind screamed that this was manipulation, that these were predators wearing the faces of my memories. But they were so perfect, so completely themselves, that doubt crept in like poison. What if I was wrong? What if the outbreak had driven me insane, made me paranoid and delusional? What if these really were the people I loved, somehow miraculously alive? "Danny?" a new voice called from the darkness. I turned and saw Amy walking down the road toward us, her face streaked with tears but otherwise unharmed. Relief flooded through me. She'd escaped the cornfield, survived the chase. "Amy, thank God They're right, Danny," she said quietly. "These are real people. I was wrong about Mark. He really is my brother. He showed me." She held up her left wrist, and I saw fresh bite marks. 2 crescent-shaped wounds that were already turning black around the edges. "He bit you," I said, horror replacing relief. "He cured me," she corrected. Made me see clearly. "Danny, we've been living in fear for nothing. These aren't monsters. They're our families trying to help us understand." The bite marks were spreading, dark veins creeping up her arm like ink in water. But Amy seemed peaceful, almost serene. "It doesn't hurt," she said, noticing my stare. "It feels like coming home." "Amy, fight it. You know what this is." "I know exactly what this is. It's connection. Real connection. Not the lonely, frightened existence we've been living." She stepped closer, and I could see her pupils were completely dilated. "They share everything, Danny. Every memory, every emotion. No more isolation. No more fear of being alone." My father nodded approvingly. "Amy understands now. The infection isn't a disease, Danny. It's evolution. A chance to become part of something larger." "We tried to tell you at the house," my mother added. "But you wouldn't listen. You were so afraid." "The rules," I said desperately. "The farmhouse had rules to keep you out." "The rules were written by frightened people who didn't understand," Sarah explained. "Janet and the others were so scared of death, they couldn't see the gift being offered." "What gift?" My brother smiled. "Immortality. Perfect memory. Never being alone again. When you join us, Danny, you'll have access to every experience of everyone who came before. You'll know what it felt like to be every person in Millfield, every joy, every love, every moment of happiness." Around us, the circle of familiar faces began moving closer. Not threatening, just welcoming. "Where are the others?" I asked. "Janet, Rick, Tom." "Safe," Amy said. "They chose to understand just like I did. Janet was the first. Once she stopped fighting, she realized how beautiful it could be. That stopped me cold. Janet had been the strongest among us, the most determined to follow the rules. If she'd given in... "Show me," I demanded. Amy nodded and whistled softly. From the cornfield emerged 5 figures walking hand in hand: Janet, Rick, Jessica, Tom, and Dolores, all moving with that same serene expression Amy wore, all showing the dark veins spreading from fresh bite marks. "We tried to run," Janet said, her voice dreamy and distant. "But why would anyone want to run from paradise?" "The rules were keeping us from happiness," Tom nodded, "keeping us isolated when we could have been part of a community." "A real community," Rick said, "not 7 terrified people hiding from salvation." They looked content, peaceful, more relaxed than I'd ever seen them at the farmhouse. Whatever was happening to them, they weren't fighting it anymore. "It's your choice, Danny," my father said gently. "We won't force you. But wouldn't you like to see your mother again? Really see her, talk to her, share memories you thought were lost forever?" The temptation was overwhelming. 3 years without my father's guidance. 2 years since I'd heard my mother's laugh. A lifetime of wondering what Mike would have become if the war hadn't taken him. "I miss you," I admitted, and my voice broke on the words. "We miss you too," my mother said, tears streaming down her face. "We've been waiting so long for you to come home." "All you have to do is accept it," Sarah said softly. "One bite, and you'll never be alone again. Never have to carry your grief by yourself." Amy stepped forward and rolled up her sleeve, showing me the spreading infection. "Look how beautiful it is, Danny. Like roots connecting me to everyone who came before." The dark veins had reached her shoulder now, pulsing gently under her skin. As I watched, her eyes rolled back briefly, and she smiled with sudden joy. "I can see my grandmother," she whispered. "She's baking apple pies. I can smell them, taste them. And my dog Buddy from when I was 8, he's here too, running in circles in our old backyard." The promise was seductive. No more loneliness, no more grief. Every person I'd ever lost, accessible through shared consciousness. "What happens to me?" I asked. "To who I am?" "You become more than you are," my father said. "You keep everything that made you Danny, but you gain everything that made us who we were. And everyone who joins after you will carry your memories forward too." "Immortality through community," my mother added. "Your consciousness preserved forever." I looked around the circle of faces, all warm with invitation, all offering an end to the pain of loss. Behind them, the Morrison farmhouse burned against the sky, a beacon marking the end of one way of living. Maybe the end of human isolation. Amy held out her hand to me, palm up. In the center was a small, precise bite mark, just enough to start the process. "It's time to come home, Danny," she said. The choice was mine. Keep running, keep hiding, keep carrying the weight of grief alone. Or accept the gift being offered and rejoin everyone I'd ever loved. I reached toward Amy's outstretched hand. My fingers were inches from her palm when I heard it. A low rumble in the distance. Getting closer. Engines. Multiple vehicles approaching fast from the north. The infected didn't react immediately, still focused on my decision. But as the sound grew louder, their expressions began to change. The warmth left their eyes, replaced by something calculating. "Danny," my father said, his voice suddenly urgent, "you need to choose now." 3 military trucks crested the hill, headlights cutting through the darkness. Behind them came an armored personnel carrier and what looked like a mobile laboratory. "The cavalry," I breathed. But Amy was shaking her head sadly. "No, Danny. Those aren't rescuers. They're the ones who started this." The military convoy screeched to a halt 20 yards away, engines still running. Soldiers poured out of the trucks, but they weren't carrying rescue equipment. Instead, they hefted tranquilizer guns and electronic devices that hummed with blue light. "Target confirmed," the lead soldier shouted into his radio. "Subject still uninfected, requesting immediate containment." My father's face twisted with sudden rage. "Run, Danny! Run now!" But before I could move, the infected around me began changing. Not physically. They still looked like my family, my friends, but their movements became synchronized, heads turning in unison toward the approaching soldiers. "Fascinating," came a voice from behind the military line. An older man in a lab coat emerged from the mobile laboratory, studying a tablet covered in data readouts. "The collective is protecting the final subject." Dr. Morrison? I recognized him from news reports before the outbreak, the CDC scientist who'd been working on consciousness transfer experiments. Janet's maiden name had been Morrison. This was her father. "Hello, Danny," he said pleasantly, adjusting wire-rimmed glasses that made him look like a harmless professor. "My daughter has told me so much about you." Janet stepped forward from the group of converted survivors, her expression no longer serene but protective. "Daddy, you promised no harm would come to the subjects who adapted well." "And I meant it, sweetheart. Danny's shown remarkable resistance to psychological manipulation. He'd make an excellent addition to the collective intelligence." Collective intelligence? I backed toward the center of the road, soldiers on one side, infected on the other. "What the hell is this?" Dr. Morrison smiled with genuine enthusiasm. "The next step in human evolution, of course. Do you know what the greatest tragedy of human existence is, Danny? Death. Every brilliant mind, every beautiful memory, every learned skill, all lost when the individual expires." Behind him, more figures emerged from the vehicles. Scientists, technicians, and what looked like government officials, all watching me like I was a lab rat. "The outbreak," I said, pieces clicking together. "You created it." Created? No. We adapted something that already existed. A parasitic organism capable of preserving neural patterns after host death. We simply improved it. Amy nodded, her black-veined face glowing with pride. The original parasite could only create mindless drones. Dr. Morrison made it capable of preserving complete personalities, intact memories. Why? Because individual human consciousness is inefficient, Dr. Morrison explained, tapping his tablet. 7 billion people, each carrying their own incomplete knowledge, each dying and taking that knowledge with them. But a collective consciousness? One that can access every memory, every skill, every innovation of everyone who joins it? Imagine the possibilities. You're talking about slavery. I'm talking about immortality. His eyes shone with fanatic fervor. Every person who joins the collective lives forever, their consciousness preserved, their knowledge shared. Newton's insights available to every member. Einstein's creativity. Shakespeare's artistry. But they're not themselves anymore. Janet spoke up, her voice carrying an odd harmony, as if multiple people were speaking through her. "We're more ourselves than we ever were alone. I have access to my grandmother's recipes, my mother's wisdom, my daughter's joy. And they have mine." "What daughter?" I asked, confused. "The one I would have had," she said peacefully. Amy's memories include the children she dreamed of having. Through the collective, I experienced that love. The soldiers had formed a perimeter around us, their weapons trained not on the infected, but on me, the only one left unchanged. The farmhouse was a testing ground, I realized. You were studying how people adapted to joining the collective. Precisely. Dr. Morrison beamed like a proud teacher. We needed to understand psychological resistance patterns, who would adapt willingly and who would require persuasion. The rules weren't protection. They were part of the experiment. Very good. The rules created artificial stress, forcing subjects to confront their deepest fears about loss and isolation. Most people, when faced with the choice between eternal loneliness and eternal connection, choose connection. My brother stepped closer, his face full of synthetic concern. Danny, why are you fighting this? You've been alone your whole life. Even when you were with people, you felt isolated. Here's a chance to never feel that way again. He was right. I'd always felt separate, even in crowds. Like there was some fundamental barrier between me and the rest of humanity. The collective understands loneliness, my mother added, because every member has experienced it. We can cure that pain forever. What happens if I refuse? Dr. Morrison consulted his tablet. Well, you can't be allowed to leave. You've seen too much. But forced conversion rarely produces stable results. The trauma of unwilling integration tends to create glitches in the collective memory. So my choices are join willingly or die. Your choice is evolution or extinction, he corrected. But Danny, why would you choose extinction? Look at what you're being offered. Around me, the infected began sharing memories. I could see it somehow. Brief flashes of experience passing between them like electrical current. A child's birthday party, a first kiss, the satisfaction of solving a difficult problem. All of it shared, all of it treasured. Every human experience preserved forever, Amy said, tears streaming down her transformed face. Every love, every triumph, every moment of beauty. Death becomes just a transition, not an ending. The temptation was overwhelming. Never again would I wake up alone in an empty apartment. Never again would I carry grief in isolation. Every person I'd ever lost would be accessible, their memories intact, their love preserved, but something mogged at me. A detail that didn't fit. If this is so wonderful, I asked, why the deception? Why not just offer it openly? Dr. Morrison's smile faltered slightly. People fear change. They cling to outdated concepts of individual identity. No, I said, understanding Donnan. There's something you're not telling me. The infected around me shifted nervously, their synchronized movements betraying their shared anxiety. What happens to people who don't adapt well? I pressed. Where are the glitches you mentioned? Danny, Janet said urgently, don't. But I was remembering things from our time at the farmhouse. The scratching sounds in Dolores's room. The figures standing motionless in the cornfield. The way certain infected moved wrong, jerky and broken. They're still conscious, aren't they? I said. The ones who resist integration. They're trapped in there, aware, but unable to control their own bodies. Dr. Morrison's expression hardened. A small percentage of subjects experience difficulty adapting to collective consciousness. Yes. How small? Roughly 40%, he admitted. 40%? The number hit me like a physical blow. You're talking about eternal torture for nearly half the people you convert. Growing pains, he said dismissively. As the collective expands, the integration process becomes smoother. You're gambling with people's souls. I'm offering humanity transcendence. Around me, the infected began to look uncertain. I could see doubt creeping into their expressions, the first individual emotions I'd witnessed since they'd been converted. Amy, I said directly, can you still feel yourself? Really feel yourself, separate from the others? Her face contorted with confusion. The collective provides. That's not what I asked. Can you feel Amy Chen, the art teacher who painted watercolors of sunsets? Or are you just accessing her memories like files in a computer? I am Amy, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Prove it. Tell me something only Amy would say, something the collective wouldn't know. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For long moments, she struggled to speak. I can't. Tears began flowing freely. I can feel her memories, but I can't feel her. She's gone, isn't she? Amy's gone. The revelation spread through the infected like wildfire. One by one, their faces began showing individual confusion, fear, grief. The collective was fragmenting as they realized what they'd lost. Enough, Dr. Morrison snapped. Sedate him. Forced conversion it is. The soldiers raised their tranquilizer guns, but before they could fire, the infected moved. Not in coordination this time, but in chaos. Each one acting on recovered individual impulses, trying to protect me, trying to escape, trying to understand what had happened to them. In the confusion, I ran. Behind me, shouts erupted as soldiers tried to maintain control. Some infected attacked their captors, while others stood frozen, overwhelmed by the return of individual consciousness. The careful experiment was collapsing into pandemonium. I reached the edge of the cornfield as gunfire began. Real bullets this time, not tranquilizers. Dr. Morrison was shouting orders to kill everyone rather than lose control of his subjects. As I crashed through the cornstalks, I heard Amy's voice one last time, clear and purely her own. Danny, remember us as we were, not as we became. Then the gunfire swallowed everything else. The recorder clicks off after 43 minutes. I set it on the motel desk next to the stack of identical devices I filled over the past 2 weeks. Each one contains my story, recorded from start to finish, every detail I can remember about Morrison Farm and Dr. Morrison's experiment, 47 copies so far. I mail 3 every day to different news outlets, government agencies, and anyone who might listen. Most probably think I'm crazy, but eventually, someone will investigate. Someone will find the burned farmhouse, the mass grave behind the barn, the government vehicles still scattered across the cornfield. The mirror above the motel sink shows a stranger's face. I've lost 20 pounds since that night, and my hair has gone mostly gray despite being only 28. Sleep comes in fragments, interrupted by dreams of Amy's voice calling my name, or Janet asking if I want more coffee, or the sound of my father teaching me to change oil. But they're just dreams now, not invitations. The infection didn't take hold. Maybe because I never let them bite me, or maybe because my natural resistance was stronger than Dr. Morrison anticipated. Either way, I'm still myself. Still alone. Still carrying the weight of what I witnessed. The news reports started 3 days after the farmhouse burned. Gas leak explosion kills rural family. Tragic accident claims 7 lives. No mention of government experiments or collective consciousness. Just another sad story about people dying during dangerous times. But I know better, and I'm not the only survivor. The knock on my door comes at exactly 9 p.m., just like it has every night for a week. Soft, polite, patient. I don't answer anymore, but I listen. Danny? The voice is different tonight. Not Amy or Janet or my father. Someone new. Danny Kowalski? My name is Rebecca Martinez. I was at the testing facility in Nevada. I escaped too. My hand freezes halfway to the door chain. Nevada facility. There were others. I know you can hear me, she continues. I've been tracking other survivors through the recordings you've been mailing. Smart thinking, by the way. I have information you need. Part of me wants to open the door, The loneliness is crushing, and the idea of finding someone else who understands, who lived through similar horrors, feels like salvation. But I've learned not to trust salvation. Dr. Morrison wasn't the only one, Rebecca says. There are 12 facilities across the country. Different approaches, different test subjects, but the same goal. I press my ear to the door, listening intently. They're calling it Project Unity. The goal is voluntary integration of the entire human population within 50 years. What happened at your farm was just a proof of concept. 50 years. The number echoes in my skull. Danny, I have files, names, locations, funding sources. People need to know what's coming. But I can't do this alone. I reach for the door handle, then stop. Through the peephole, I can see her clearly. Mid-30s, dark hair, wearing jeans and a jacket that looks like it hasn't been washed in days. She looks exhausted, haunted, real. But then again, so had Amy. So had Janet. So had everyone at Morrison Farm. I understand why you don't trust me, Rebecca says softly. But ask yourself this. If they could create perfect mimics, why would they need to find you? Why not just replace you and move on? It's a fair point. And if she's real, if there really are 11 other facilities, then people deserve to know. Deserve to make their own choices before Dr. Morrison's vision becomes reality. I count to 10, then unlock the door. Rebecca Martinez smiles when she sees me, and for just a moment, the relief on her face looks genuine enough to believe. Thank God, she says. I was starting to think I was the only one left who remembered what it meant to be human. I step aside to let her in, hoping I'm making the right choice, hoping she's real, hoping I'm still human enough to tell the difference.